Big decisions about the unfinished jail in Detroit, plus a closer look at the impact of water shutoffs. The city primary is next week, and our take on White House communications. Stay put. My Week starts right now.
Did you know Gordon Food Service was started by a 23-year-old entrepreneur as a butter and egg delivery business more than a century ago? In 1948, school teacher Gerard Wendell Hayworth borrowed $10,000 from his parents to start a woodworking operation in his family's garage. It's now Hayworth Incorporated. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Funding for this program is provided by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing.
Hi there and welcome to My Week. I'm Christy McDonald. Thanks so much for making time to join us this week. Coming up, we're taking a closer look at the details that could finalize a move of the Wayne County Jail and a development deal with Dan Gilbert. Plus, an in-depth One Detroit report on the impact of water shutoffs in the city and what is being done to minimize the health risk for people who can't afford their bills. And our take on White House Communications 101. That's all coming up for you on My Week. But we do start with the Detroit primary coming up this Tuesday. Not only is there a race for mayor, but city council and clerk. So let's bring in our My Week contributors, Nolan Finley of the Detroit News, Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. Guys, we are just a couple days away from this primary. And Stephen, you don't find it so exciting?
Well, there's not a lot of really great races. For the last two cycles in Detroit, we've had real questions about who was going to win, who was going to make it through to the general election. Maybe it's a sign of more stability in the city's governance that we don't this time. I mean, I can't name a single council race even that I think is likely to yield a surprise. The clerk's race is really the only thing that seems somewhat competitive, and I'm not sure how competitive it actually is. We have an outsider candidate who I think is quite impressive, who both newspapers endorsed. So we'll see how that goes. But I'm not staying up late Tuesday to see what happens.
Overview, Nolan, do you agree with Stephen in terms of, does this give kind of a sign of more stability that city council has kind of evened off a little bit?
Perhaps. I mean, I remember the days when there'd be 60 to 100 city council candidates in a race, and
we used to have to deal with them in debates.
You have to interview them all. Maybe the districts have changed the dynamic somewhat. That's the only thing I can think of that's different. I don't think it's stability that's keeping people out. I think the district format is maybe lends itself a little less to these big, massive ballots. I agree with Steve on the clerk's race, though. It's an interesting race, and this Garland Gilchrist, the young guy who seems to have some expertise and some technical skills. That clerk's office is a mess. And if Janice Winfrey gets elected again, I mean, the people will get what they deserve in terms of being cheated out of their vote. And that's what she's done. When people go to the polls and vote, and because of the incompetence of the bureaucracy, their ballots get spoiled. That's disenfranchised.
Well, and would she be the most vulnerable this time around, given what happened with the presidential election?
I mean, that was a pretty hard shot at Janice, who I think has made some real mistakes and fallen behind in recent years. There aren't spoiled ballots. There are ballots that have been compromised in such a way that they can't be recounted, but they all count toward the final total when they are counted the first time. Now, I'm not making excuses for the things that they did wrong, especially in the last election. But to say that people's votes didn't count as a result is actually not so.
They lost bags of ballots and were unable, as you said, unable to recount. Had that recount in Michigan gone through, we would have been a national embarrassment, because Michigan was pivotal to the election, and you would have had all of these Democratic votes that wouldn't have been able to be recounted. It would have been a disaster, and it stems to incompetence in the office.
Yeah, I think the report of the elections director, the statewide elections director, on what happened during that election fell far short of that kind of indictment. It did talk about the problems in that office.
Wasn't the first election that was screwed up?
No, we've had a problem with this for a while. Janice, I think, has reached a point where she can't take the clerk's office
So my
any further.
question is, does this make her the most vulnerable than she can ever be at this point?
I don't know. I think she's vulnerable, but I don't know if it's the most vulnerable. I think, Janice deserves a lot of credit for what she did when she got elected to that office 12 years ago. Jackie Curry had that office in a really bad state. Janice cleaned up all of the problems that we were facing at that time. I think she may just not be the person now to take us into the future.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the mayor's race. The Detroit News, you guys had a poll which put Mike Duggan up in around 60%, and gave Coleman Young, he was about at 30%, which is a little bit higher than he had been polling in the late spring or so. Are we still looking at these two guys?
Well, I think so, and it's it is surprising that a first-term mayor isn't getting a stronger challenge from someone, but he has. I mean, you can take a look at this. He has lined up the entire black power structure in the city. The Black Slate endorsed him this week. The pastors endorsed him. The unions are. This is a pretty remarkable accomplishment for a guy who
for a white guy from Livonia.
Yeah, who moved into the city 4.5, 5 years ago, and you have now the black power structure firmly in his corner. I mean, it's quite an accomplishment.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think Coleman Young is in for a pretty rough night, primary night, and if he gets into the general, possibly a rough night in November. It is pretty remarkable that Duggan has been able to do that. I think, again, there is some expectation now of stability, even though people in the city are frustrated still with what they see around them. If you live in most neighborhoods, I think it's hard to point to a lot of concrete things that are better in your life, but they can take account for the things that have happened, and they can attribute that to Mike Duggan and say, all right, the lights are on, Dave Bing started that, but Mike Duggan finished it. The garbage gets picked up on time. The buses run a little more on time than they used to. These are basic services, but we had come to expect that those wouldn't be there for us.
And there's a sense of competence, a sense of movement. And if you look at the money raised, I think Coleman Young had raised just $22,000 in the last report. That's not going to pay for campaign lunches on the trail. I mean, it's just not enough money to mount an effective campaign.
Give people some insight as to how both your newsrooms operate on a primary night like this. What are you guys going to be prepared for? Come on, you can give me a little bit.
Well, we try not to.
Don't give me that. Well, it's a big.
You'll be
we try not to announce one
please.
winner and then it's actually someone else.
Yeah, are we going to work on that this time around?
We really make an effort not to do that.
We're going to make sure. No, I didn't bring that up. You did. Let the record show that.
You can laugh about it. It's not my operation.
You got to.
Go ahead, Dolan.
It depends on the election. I mean, obviously, this one won't have the intensity of the presidential election or a general election, but you normally have a lot of people coming in covering different levels of races. You have a whole bank of folks making calls to local clerks to get vote totals in these community races, and then on up the line. In a general election, the whole newsroom would be engaged. And a night like Tuesday night, where it's a little smaller,
the pizza order will be a little
it's
smaller.
A little smaller.
What about you guys?
You still got to feed the sports department, so you got to have the same number of pizzas.
It looks about the same, and you've got editors and, as you point out, a lot of volunteers in looking at these vote totals, trying to make sense because they come in such small numbers. Everybody's drive is to A, get it right, but also B, to be the first person to announce. I've always thought that was a little strange. What difference does it really make the next day if you were the first person to announce something that's going to...
For local news, they do a proof of performance saying you saw it first here on whatever.
But sometimes it's easy. You're wrapped up 10 o'clock. Everybody knows who's won. It's on the 11 o'clock news. I covered I ran the election when Engler and ran against Badger and won. It was all night. We're sitting there. That was when we had additions going through the night and into the morning, and we're sitting there at about 7:30, 8 o'clock, and there's still there's no defined winner. We looked at where the votes were out still, and it was in the Republican districts of Western Wayne County, Livonia and Canton, and we figured John Engler had won this. He was ahead by about a few thousand votes at that time, and the last votes not counted were in those Republican districts, and that was the way we were able to to call the race, but
that call.
it's not always easy.
All right. Well, we'll be looking at both debtnews.com and freep.com for it all. You know, we're closer to a decision on the unfinished Wayne County Jail. Wayne County Executive Warren Evans says he's looking at settling on an offer from Dan Gilbert's Rock Ventures to develop the jail site in exchange for building a new justice complex a few miles away. Now, the Rock Ventures office is about a $520 million offer and would include a $1 billion investment on the Gratiot site that may include a pro soccer stadium, hotel. You know, the new criminal justice complex, including jail, would be at I-75 in East Warren at the Detroit transportation site. Evans says there are some details still to work out with Rock Ventures, but this is where they're putting their focus, saying this deal, instead of finishing the project at Gratiot, would be better for the taxpayers. And let me start with you, Stephen. You spoke with Warren Evans this week. What are some of the fine details that they're looking at right now, or they're looking at to kind of push to make sure it's the right thing for?
Well, I mean, you've got to vet all the numbers and make sure they actually can come out of this with all of the things that they need, right? The county doesn't just need new jail space; it needs a new courthouse, it needs new juvenile facilities, and all those things. So you want to make sure that that's actually going to happen if you sign this deal. One of the other questions still out there, though, is this IRS penalty that they would face if they move the jail site from where it is over to Warren, because they sold bonds for that original site. The IRS would assess them some sort of penalty, I think, for doing that. Is that going to be so big that the deal doesn't end up making sense? I think that's one of the biggest outstanding issues. My sense from talking to Warren, though, is that this is pretty much, I mean, barring something extraordinary, some extraordinary discovery about something that's not going to happen or some cost that's unforeseen, this is the way that they want to go.
So, Nolan, when you saw the news that this is the way that they're leaning, did you say this is probably the right thing that they should do, or do you still have some
No, I
reservations
think it's an
about
inspired deal. I think nothing changes the fact that the Wayne County taxpayers got shafted to the tune of about $140 million with this jail. This was just a complete boondoggle. Somebody probably should have paid a much stiffer price for that bungling and outright corruption. And
no prison terms yet.
But if you look at, if you look at that era, that was $150 million on the jail, $35 million at this racetrack that never got. This is the Ficano years. This racetrack that never produced. $17 million for the Guardian building. I mean, we are in a different day, thank goodness, in terms of investing the taxpayer money. And I think this is an inspired deal. You get, particularly because you get protection from cost overruns, and that's what doomed the original jail project.
That is a huge thing.
So let me skip a little further, and maybe this is a little farther down the road to take a look at. But does pro soccer fly in Detroit at that location? Is that the best?
You're probably asking the wrong generation. I mean, if you go out
Whoa,
to that,
Nolan, are you saying that you're old?
I think you're post-soccer. I mean, if I was talking about all three of us, but if you look at those Detroit Football Club, those fans are fanatical.
Different fans, though.
There's six, but you don't know if he'll be able to convert them.
I was just going to say, he's an anti-establishment fan.
So if you go out to those DCFC games, they have like paper mache mock-ups of Dan Gilbert, and they're saying no MLS, and I mean they're actively pushing back against the idea that we would get Major League Soccer here. So I think it is a different crowd. The tickets for that are $10 too. They aren't going to be $10 if he spends $1 billion on a stadium downtown.
I think it's a good seed. It's a good start. I think you can convert some of those people and build off of it. I wouldn't go to a Major League Soccer game if somebody were paying me to go.
Yes, you
would. There's a lot of kids.
You might.
I would not. There's a lot of kids.
I'm going to write this down.
There's a lot of kids who grew up playing
there's a lot
soccer.
of fans. There are a lot of soccer fans here.
A lot of kids who play.
I think the bigger question for me is, does this end up harming the DCFC, which I think is this really remarkable group of sort of plucky entrepreneurs who've got something good going. I mean, they've got something that actually works. If they siphon off their fans, do you leave them sort of high and dry?
People don't necessarily have to choose. I mean, they can do both.
They don't. My prediction is that
two different experiences, perhaps.
Yeah, my prediction is that you'll see some sort of collaboration between Dan Gilbert and his group and the DCFC group that tries to preserve all of it,
Well,
even if they have.
If they're smart, they'll learn from that group and make the experience in that new stadium very similar to what what these folks are doing out there.
All right, we'll see. Turning now to a One Detroit special report on water shutoffs. A new study shows increased health issues among people who have had their water turned off. And our colleagues at Bridge Magazine report that more than 27,000 Detroit homes had their water shut off last year because of unpaid bills. Tonight, the story of a community advocate trying to get residents' water turned back on.
D'Amico Williams calls himself a community advocate. He runs a group called Hydrate Detroit, which helps people when their water has been shut off.
You have 45,000 people that are on payment plans, 9,000 people shut off, and there is no room for amnesty. There's no room for even modification of some of these outrageous, outstanding bills.
Earlier this week, he was on the road across Detroit meeting his clients, people trying to get their water turned back on.
Everything is done by a system of giving. We reach out to social media. We reach out to our friends, our family, our neighbors to see what they can do to help. When you work off $200 a month, what can you do?
Deshawn Adams lives on the east side. She lost her water a week ago.
My new bill just came in. It's over $900 at this point.
We'll go to the 106 line and see what happens.
Yeah, that's what they told me this.
Right, because I had already called about you and they were supposed to mark it in the computer. When I called the lady today, I wasn't able to get in touch with her.
The bill just built up, built up, built up. Searching for employment, but I'm limited to what I can do because of my physical limitations. I have multiple health problems. For me, the main one is having to sleep with a CPAP machine that does not operate without water.
This water shutoff can make or break a person. When the tap runs dry, you're wondering, how can you get water? You know, you're panicking. You're in a state of shock. You don't know what the hell to do. And basically, Miss Adams stayed as calm as anybody I've seen in this condition.
Charlotte Woods bought her home on the far west side, on the other side of Telegraph Road a few years ago. She works full-time at an auto parts manufacturer. She's also a single mother with 4 kids. Her water was shut off 2 months ago. She says she can probably handle reasonable water bill payments, but not a bill adding up to thousands.
Wow.
Yes, wow.
What in the world?
Yeah.
What happened here?
There is a spout that's on the other side of this house.
Okay.
And I was unaware that was there. I didn't know it was there. And I've been here about maybe ever since I bought the house in March of 14. And I didn't know that there was a spigot on the other side. The only way I found out was that the next door neighbor was like, "Did you know that there was water running?" This water right here will probably last me for about 4 days. This part of it will last me no more than about like a day and a half. But this, because they're very good about drinking water. They just drink 1 or 2 a day. I'm just worried, first of all, just about the kids. That's my biggest concern is the kids. Brushing their teeth. It's a good water to brush their teeth with, wash their face, to take towel baths with. Because of my water situation, I keep plenty of Clorox on hand for the bathroom, for the kitchen, to clean other things. So until we get the water back on.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to talk with my team about this and see what we can do. Because $9,000 is. It is. We could get this knocked down. Mm-hmm. We can get this knocked down.
D'Amico Williams in Hydrate Detroit can only help a few clients at a time. But Williams wants more people to know there are some outside agencies like his that are here to help.
It could happen to anybody, but we're not talking. And when you don't talk, people don't know. And if people don't know, how can people help you?
Possession of mine.
Well, one of the women in the report, Deshawn Adams, is scheduled to have her water turned back on today after D'Amico Williams got her financial assistance. Meanwhile, the Detroit Water and Sewage Department tells us less than 1,000 households are currently at risk for water shutoffs for non-payment, and 98% of them get their water turned back on in 24 hours by working out a payment plan or securing financial help through a regional assistance program. All right, and finally tonight, the value of communications and what's happening at the White House. It's no secret the upheaval from Sean Spicer to Anthony Scaramucci has turned White House communications into a reality TV show, which is interesting for a president who seems very savvy to the value of message. And when I watched everything happen last week, the mooch was in, the mooch was out. It kind of shocks me a little bit because, Nolan, let me start with you. President Trump seems to me very understanding of the value of good PR, and he seems to have created this chaotic place that they do not have the right message.
I think he's a PR disaster. I don't know where we get that premise, but
I get it from his history of reality television and self-promotion.
That's promotion. That's promotion, not public relations. I mean, he's tone deaf, and that's the first, I think, the key to a good communications and public relations strategy. You got to hear, you got to listen. But as for Scaramucci, I mean, the biggest disappointment there is Saturday Night Live was on hiatus. Well, that brief tenure.
We didn't get that.
They never get to parody him. I was rooting for Joe Pesci in that role. That would have been a good comeback.
I think Joe Pesci might be too old to have.
Well, you could have made him up.
That would have been funny though.
I mean, Melissa McCarthy was
right. She's a woman playing a guy, right?
Yeah. What's your take on this? And do you think how much of an impact do you think it's having on the presidency and his approval ratings, which are at an all-time low?
His approval ratings are low, but more importantly, this is a White House that has not figured out a way to govern in any sort of meaningful way, and part of it is messaging. The president's got to learn that this isn't a reality TV show. It's not Hollywood or some sort of drama. That governance from the White House is a particular creature, and that he needs some people around him who understand how that creature operates if he wants to be successful at it. I think moving General Kelly into the role of Chief of Staff is probably a pretty decent move in that direction. Here's somebody who's a grown-up, who understands those things. But they need a lot more substitutions for the players that he's put around him if they're going to do this.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think he needs to get his family out of there first thing. The family's caused him a lot of trouble.
I don't think he's ever going to do that.
I wouldn't be so sure. I mean, John Kelly, again, promises to bring. I mean, the hope there is that he'll bring some discipline to a White House that has been undisciplined. First thing he did is say everybody reports to John Kelly.
Sure.
Jared Kushner, they can't go around him, Don Jr., Ivanka, they all come up through John Kelly. I would expect to see the family gradually moved out of the way. I think that, you've got a disciplined fellow and one who understands the importance of organization and of execution, very effective general. I don't think he's going to let the sort of chaos and everybody trying to stab everybody else go on.
Well, you're going to have to see if that becomes a reality.
Well, that's
because
what
you're going to run out of what you're calling competent adults who are going to want to serve in that administration. We have 20 seconds left.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of this is something that foils a lot of presidents, right? Obama had Rahm Emanuel in the first few years. He was actually great at running the White House. Turned out to be a bad mayor. You got to get this right, otherwise the administration goes off the rails.
All right, well, we'll see.
Keep a position in administration.
Yeah, we will see. And hey, that's going to do it for MiWeek. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be back next week with Nolan and Stephen, but until then, find us on Facebook and on Twitter at MiWeek. For all of us at Detroit Public TV, thanks so much for watching. I'm Christy McDonald. We will see you next time. Take care.